I've got to be the dumbest swindler in the world. Like, swindlers end up with money. I just lose money. Look, I shouldn't have bought it from Jean-Michel. Firing him, I'm sure why we were sanctioned. I'm sure it's why we were relegated. I think he worked very hard to create the environment which led to our relegation. I'm sure of it.
For you think you've been played?
Of course.
By Jean-Michel Aulas at the time?
Benzema, I think he has to return to us. I think he has the ability right now to come in and impact this team at an incredible level. Bonjour, c'est John TEXTOR, c'est Carré.
John, thank you very much for having me. We're here in your hotel room in Paris. First, to make it clear, you left the presidency of OL 6 months ago. Who are you now regarding Olympique Lyonnais?
Yes, I resigned as president back on June 29th, actually the very end of the year. And I guess my last act as president of the football club OL Sassou, I appointed Michel Kang to replace me at the football club.
But you're still the owner of the group, so?
Yeah, I'm the majority shareholder of Eagle. I control the majority of the board seats of Eagle.
So is that right if I say you're still the OL big boss?
Well, sure.
Indirectly?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's been no change in shareholdings. Michelle is roughly a 5% shareholder at Eagle, but she's also a lender in different capacities. She put in money along with Aries to help achieve the successful appeal. But there's been no change to shareholder ownership down at OL. Michelle is in fact the president reporting to a board. Her ownership actually comes by way of Eagle, not by way of OL.
Congratulations for the DNCG decision. OL has no longer any sanction for recruiting players. Only about the payroll. It's a big step for you?
Well,
not that much.
No, I mean, I think it's bittersweet. I continue to have a very maybe unusual perspective on the DNCG. I think when you have an organization which is well backed, as we are, whether it's the 200 million in cash that I invested or the, I don't know, probably 100 million or so from Eagle to women's to now OL that Michelle's invested or that Aries has invested. You know, the fact that we have a volunteer panel of people at the DNCG that think they know better how to run our business than, say, Michelle does, I don't think she should have to worry about salary caps. I think she can make decisions for the health of the club without this kind of oversight. And I think my perspective on this is probably why we're here. Why we ran into this problem, because certainly as we go through some of this today, it's hard to argue that the DNCG ever had reason to relegate us, nor do I think they have a reason to tell her what she can spend on salaries.
Next question is, why are you here today and why is it important to you to communicate? Why is it important for you to talk today?
Well, first of all, I come and go from France on a regular basis. I've been coming to this country for many years. My mother is from this country. My family, we consider ourselves French, American French. So I never answer the question, why am I in Paris or why am I in Lyon? Why am I talking now? I think something really upset me.
Tell me.
About a recent article. It was the phantom transfer article. Now, as I resigned, knowing that I was sort of the political problem that created this relegation situation.
Because just a few weeks after you left, the DNCG said, no problem, you're not relegated, the club is not relegated no more.
Same budget, same amount of support from the shareholders, maybe organized differently, but we'll go through these numbers, just a different face, and we go back into the first division. So you'll notice I didn't care so much when all the articles get written, you know, saying that I was forcibly removed. I wasn't. I still have full control of the board, my own decision to resign. I asked Michelle 30 days prior to the DNCG hearing if she would consider being co-chair, because I knew her profile and support politically was much better than my own. I'm a disruptor. That doesn't go well in France. So
you think the sanctions were about your person, about who you are, more than your project?
Of course. And so the articles that were written, financial irregularities and, you know, what was wrong with the file, what's most surprising about that is nobody has ever asked, well, what's wrong with this DNCG decision? So when I talked to you tonight about what we brought into those meetings on May 20th and June 24th, I hope everybody asks, well, how does a club with so much in resources get treated like Bordeaux? And frankly, not knowing the facts of Bordeaux, I almost want to look at that and say, how the hell did they get sent down? That may be a whole bunch of different issues. But I've kept my mouth shut, given Michel the space to run. Anytime I open my mouth, somebody in the Federation or the DNCG wants to punish Lyon. So I've been quiet. But when I see articles that just cross the line to talk about phantom transfers, that was it for me. Those were football players that wanted to be here in Lyon. And what the fans of Lyon don't understand is that the DNCG was targeting our sporting model before they were targeting our financial model. And I believe it's clear based on the timing of those transfers that those players wanted to be in OL, they should have been in OL, and we should be in Champions League right now as a result of what would have been their remarkable play.
Because they are great players. We can name the players because we saw Thiago Almada with the OL shirts, not the other. Igor Jesus, Luis Enrique, Jair Cunha, and Jefferson Savarino, right?
Igor, Luis Enrique. I focused in my statement recently on the players that were transferred.
On the biggest players.
Before the transfer ban.
Okay.
In 2024. Jair and Savarino, the timing of those I'm not sure. But I was focusing on the big three. And they were all transferred validly at the end of their natural cycle in Brazil because the season ends in early December. So players are looking for their deals for their next club from July through September, October, November. And those players were acquired by OL prior to us knowing we had any chance of a transfer ban. And if you don't sign athletes at the end of their season in South America, you can't compete for them. Right? You don't wait until January for players that are ready to move in October. So for the DNCG to come along in November, December and say, oh, we're concerned about you, OL. We don't know that you have the money to buy new players. Well, that's fine. It's their right to decide that. But I don't think it's their right to say that we cannot roster players that we already owned. They were not only bought by OL.
Because to make it clear, they signed the contract with both clubs, Botafogo, and it was written this player will go to Lyon after Botafogo, right?
The contract for Luis Enrique in January 2024, you may like it or not like it that a multi-club can do this, but his original contract with Eagle Football had three parties. One was Olympique Lyon, two was Botafogo, three was Luis Enrique himself. Very uniquely, he is a player who was already an established European player, got to decide when he comes, which window he chooses. So we asked him, come to Brazil, enjoy Brazil, bring your family back to Brazil. You know Brazil, win for us. Let's try to win a championship together. And what I loved about what happened with him is he got down there and he decided to stay longer. But then when we won Brazil, we won South America, he was named best player in Brazil, best player in South America. He flew to Lyon and said, I'm ready. So how does the DNCG say, if they care about our money, well, you can't afford a player that you already own. Now, whether you own him at Lyon because you did an intercompany transfer, or whether you own him in Brazil and you loan him, this was the most remarkable decision that for Igor, for Thiago, and for Luis Enrique. Imagine if those three players were all on that roster come January, that we already owned them, but we can't afford them all of a sudden. Now, one step further, I told the DNCG, you don't understand. If we don't roster them, they get to break the contract. It's a breach of our agreement with the player. So now you're losing money because a $30 million athlete or a $40 million athlete just gets to walk and go to another club. So don't tell me this wasn't about sporting, because the prior summer, when I bought the club, invested a bunch of capital, paid off a lot of debt, pulled them out of an insolvent situation. I was hit with a transfer ban for the first time in 36 years. OL suddenly had a transfer ban. I had a relegation squad, 7 points after 14 rounds, and everybody watched a little bit of multi-club magic, and we were the best team in France for the second half of the season. So I don't think that went over well with friends of Jean-Michel, whether it was helping him or whether it was, being concerned about the multi-club. I didn't see they had these same concerns about Strasbourg and Chelsea.
You mean you think Jean-Michel Aulas wanted to trap you?
Look, I think that the whole of France saw how gleeful he might have been when he sold the club and put a bunch of money in his pocket. But 2 months later, he's on television saying he's not going to listen to Eagle football if it comes time to make a football decision. The whole country wanted us to fire Bruno Charoux and Vincent Ponceau. But if I told him to do it, the answer was no. It was only a matter of time before he's on Twitter taking shots at us and criticizing us and waking up the next day and saying his account was hacked.
For you, it was quite a betrayal from Aulas at the time?
I don't think it's a betrayal. We didn't know each other, but it was extreme seller's remorse. He was forced to sell the club by the majority. They gave him a full year and a half to buy it. He didn't come up with the money. They choose me, of all people, to be the buyer because they thought I was the most likely to get along with him because collaboration is, our model at Eagle. But he's not the first person to have this problem. When you've been running a company for 30 years and it's become your identity and suddenly somebody takes it away from you, it's difficult. So I feel bad for him in that respect. But the fact is he did sell us the right to make football decisions, and you can't go on press and tell everybody, the fans, that, Eagle doesn't count. So yeah, I think it was tough for him. We had to fire him. We fired him for cause. He negotiated a change in that definition of termination. We ultimately decided to give him a $10 million payout, which was his original payout. He signed a non-disparagement agreement to say he's not going to say anything bad about us. It took him about 2 weeks before he violated that again and again and again. I would go into some of the most powerful homes and businesses of the most important people in France who would say, John, watch out. The guy's still going for it. You stole his baby from him. So, look, if this is news to people, that would shock me because everybody saw this play out. I think he worked very hard to create the environment which led to our relegation. I'm sure of it. I think the problems we had with the federation, what is the French Football Federation doing calling the Belgian Football Federation when we got approved for our license in Molenbeek and saying, you should take another look at that Ernest Nuama transaction. And then 3 days later, we get a letter that our license is under review in Belgium.
Wow. And you're saying that because Jean-Michel Aulas is vice president of the federation.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, what is the French football?
I'm giving the context.
What is the French Football Federation doing, calling it a Belgium, a second division club, and saying you really need to look at their license? Why is the French Football Federation, maybe for the first time, holding up our application to UEFA for our UEFA license, saying, no, we're going to reject it down at the federation level? Wouldn't the federation be trying to help French football clubs get up to Europa League? Instead, we got rejected at the federation. So, look, it's obvious what was happening. The man froze 14 of our bank accounts and seized $42 million by calling a friend at the Lyon commercial court. If people forget this, I understand. But the second big item that we discovered later, I wasn't aware that we had a DNCG problem before I closed. Okay. But when I found out in the spring of 2023 that we were going to be sanctioned, Jean-Marc Mickler, the chair of the DNCG, said, well, John, I warned you. And what do you mean you warned me? And he informed me about the letter that was sent at the time they approved our change of control. I had to look back in my email, and there it was on Friday night, December 16th. I was sent an email by Jean-Michel and Thierry Sauvage, and the headline said, positive decision. They've approved your change of control. Well, it wasn't a positive decision. Attached to it was a very long letter at the bottom of it, it said if you don't put in $150 million, you're going to be subject to Article 11 sanctions. We believe your projections are too optimistic. We understand there's a new plan. We don't think the money is enough for you to be sustainable. We think it's optimistic to say you're going to be in Champions League every year when you haven't been. So there was a hard warning sent on December 16th from the DNCG. It was sent to me on a Friday night by Jean-Michel, and the closing was the next Monday morning. Well, if you have that kind of bad news, you have an obligation to disclose it to the buyer, to the buyer's attorneys, to the buyer's consultants, to everybody. That's fair disclosure. Because had we known that we were given an Article 11 threat the night before the closing, we would have renegotiated. We would have said, why are we paying $300 million off the balance sheet? We need to put more on the balance sheet.
For you think you've been played?
Of course.
By Jean-Michel Aulas at the time?
A positive decision is the subject of the email that attaches a warning that you're going to be sanctioned, right? That's not fair disclosure. So the projections were inflated. The warning came hard. It was sent to me, only me, nobody CC'd. I don't check my email. And did he send me the email? Yes. Did I understand what it was? No. Did he send it to the deal team and the lawyers? Definitely not. Had we seen it, would we have renegotiated the balance that came in? So I think Jean-Michel has the community of Lyon to answer to this, because there's no getting around the fact that we should have taken more of the money. Instead of putting it into the pockets of the sellers, including Jean-Michel, we should put it on the balance sheet. We never should have had any probability showing up with $800 million that we would have been sanctioned the very next window and facing relegation. So that's how this relationship started with Jean-Michel. And so, yes, I'm clearly unhappy about it. Jean-Michel does have a very proud legacy for doing wonderful things for the community of Lyon. But after 36 years of running a club, he delivered a business that was not sustainable, that could not stand on its own 2 feet.
To come back on the phantom transfers, to make it clear, because we read a lot of things and now you're giving your truth, so it's important to be factual. Is that true that Lyon had to reimburse money for the purchase of the 5 Botafogo players, Jesus, Enrique, Almada, Cunha, Savarino, who, apart from Almada, never wore the Lyon jersey, this generating a debt of 120 million?
It is true that they bought those players.
Okay.
When you buy those players, you have to pay for them. Typically, you pay installments to the club that sold you the players. That's exactly how this deal was structured. The talk of factoring is a bit of a smokescreen, because whether it's Botafogo or Atlanta United or somebody else, if Lyon bought the players, it owes installment payments to the club that sold them. The club that sold them quite frequently will go to a third-party institution and sell the receivable.
Okay.
And we'll give an instruction to the buying club to say, hey, when it comes time to pay us this year, next year, don't pay us, pay this other institution. So when we hear about this liability that OL has to Macquarie or MCCP, it is the obligation to pay for the players you bought. Now, it seems quite bizarre that they never wore jerseys for OL. Well, that's the question. Why? That's the most important question. Exactly. That question should be asked of DNCG, because the DNCG then looks at the financials of OL and says, you have all these payments to make. Well, okay, then why not let us play the athletes? How can you charge OL, in a sustainability exam for the cost of those players, but not allow the players to wear the shirt? Because what would have happened?
That's your big point.
What would have happened? You see Igor Jesus scored another goal last night and another goal against Liverpool. He was the best guy on the pitch against Liverpool. And what would have happened if you've got Igor Jesus and Mikitadze on one roster? You've got Luis Enrique and Ernest Nuama both working the same wing. You've got Thiago Almada along with Ryan Cherki in the middle. And we just missed Champions League. Well, what do you think would have happened had the DNCG allowed us to play the players that we bought? So when somebody says, well, you ran up these liabilities, these are player purchases. Yeah, we ran up the installment, obligation to buy them, but we also increased the squad value. So unfortunately, they were never able to play for OL. Their economic rights were still owned by OL. And when Botafogo sold those players to Zenit, to Nottingham Forest, to Atletico Madrid, 100% of the money came to OL. So, I think the way this has been characterized in the press has been extremely defamatory. It makes it look like it was a non-football transaction. The only thing that's bizarre is a retroactive sanction to say you can't afford to buy a player you already bought.
To make it clear, what is the money situation between OL and Botafogo? Because we read a lot of stuff. Who owns money to who? How much?
Well,
because it's the same group, but different clubs.
There's no debate about this. The money was all well accounted for by well-audited organizations that had a central treasury function. Like we even passed a shareholder resolution in France, and we did the same thing in Brazil, that we would pool our cash together and we would keep track of the loans between the clubs, and it would be a very low interest rate charged between them.
That's what DNCG didn't like.
Look, I think the DNCG had calls from a bunch of presidents, the same presidents that were openly protesting Thiago Almada. I think those same presidents were looking at us jumping up off the 18th position into Europa League and saying we don't want them doing it again. That's what I think. So this cash pooling is quite simple. Botafogo was having an incredible year. Pulled in 9 million for winning the league. 28 million for winning Copa Libertadores, 23 million for qualifying for the Club World Cup. It sold 111 million to players. The revenues of Botafogo went from 20 million US dollars when I bought it in 2022 to 220 million dollars last year. 10 times increase in sales.
And you use this money to help.
And people in France say, oh, we're paying for the championships of Botafogo. Well, I'm sorry, the starting loss that I assumed at Lyon is 139 million euros net loss in 2022-23 if you adjust for the one-time CVC money. If you take the CVC money out, Olympique Lyon was not only insolvent because the bank loans were due, its operating cash loss was about 44 million a year. Its bottom line loss, which is somewhat irrelevant because it's mostly amortization, but it's also interest, was 139 million as a loss. So how is it, losing all that money, that Lyon was buying championships in Brazil? It wasn't. So there's another way that cash is created down in Brazil. If Lyon purchases players from Botafogo, well, not only does Botafogo have the cash that it's been earning, but it also has the cash installments that it expects in the future. And when it goes out and sells those receivable to a third-party institution, it has even more cash. Now it has a choice to make. Do we use our cash to pay our bills in Brazil, where we've got the best year in 120 years and we're loaded with cash, or do we help our brother? And our brother needed help. So the actual math is that over the 18-month period or so where this was happening, 146 million of euros of wires were sent in cash from Brazil to France. Almost 40 million was sent back the other way because seasonality, you have a need at this club, you have a need at that club. So the net cash difference of money owed from OL to Botafogo today is 104 million euros.
Okay.
Now,
is that the situation now between the two?
It depends on what you do with the adjustment for these players. So in May, when I went to the May 20th hearing, I went to the DNCG and said, what do you want me to do with these players? You have to let us roster these players, right? And if you don't let us roster them, well, then you have to respect a contract and I will sell them back. So I signed a contract and said, let's sell them back to Brazil, and it reverses the sale. But I said, I don't want to do this. I want them to play here. They don't. They want to play in Europe now. They want to play for Lyon. They already signed contracts, right? So you can't hurt us both ways. Hurt us on the cash and hurt us on the sporting. So with these contracts in hand, I went to the DNCG on May 20th and said, what do you want me to do? Well, we never got an answer, of course, because of what happened next. But those transactions were never finalized because the players never signed. And that's the way football works. They have to sign and authorize a transfer. So what that means is that the economic rights of those players are still owned by Olympique Lyonnais. So when we sold them, what did we do with the money? 100% of the money that we got from Zenit on Luis Enrique was wired to OL. 100% of the money that we got for Igor Jesus when he was sold to Nottingham Forest, we wired this to OL. 100% of the money that we got for the sale of half of Thiago Almada, that was also credited to the balance that OL owes to Botafogo. So 100% of the money of those players, OL bought the players, so they deserve to get the money for the players. And the good news, I'll tell people at OL, is we only sold half of Thiago Almada. And now he's at Atletico Madrid. He's starting in the Argentine national team alongside Messi.
So OL has still 50% of Thiago Almada.
When Atletico Madrid sells him, I hope for a much higher number, that money is owned by OL. So every contract was valid, signed by the players, FIFA compliant, and the accounting is honored. But the fact is, if you then take the 104 million that was owed in wires, and you credit back the 81 million that we got when we sold those players, and you split 50-50 the transaction costs associated therewith, Olympique Lyon owes 34.8 million euros back to Botafogo. Now, it's not a huge number. It's just when the DNCG comes in, because they're smarter than us, they run better football clubs, they interrupt your business model, where the greatest profit of our clubs was the appreciation and value of taking players from South America, bringing them into Europe and selling them for more. That's now been interrupted because they don't want multi-club collaboration. Well, they're okay with Strasbourg and Chelsea because everybody loves the president of Strasbourg. I love the president of Strasbourg, right? But I'm not him. He's better looking. He's funnier. He's a better player, right? So we didn't get the same deal. And but yeah, those phantom transfers, no, those are real football decisions. And the supporters of Lyon can be upset with me for reasons that I'll tell you why they should be upset with me. But
tell me.
They should be upset that the DNCG was intervening with our sporting model, and the best players in South America did not get to wear OL jerseys, and they were free. The protests that JP Callio organized, it was ultimately admitted to by the president of Nice. He said, I didn't want to file the reserve against Thiago Almada, but I promised a friend. They called him a free loan. Well, it's the most expensive free loan in history because we bought him. And the DNCG said, well, we'll let you loan him to the squad. But then even that wasn't good enough because later they say we're never going to allow free loans again to players, to teams that are sanctioned. So, you know, that's a big question for Jean-Michel. When your best friends that you've known for years were making it impossible on your club, protesting Thiago Almada to the point that Thiago said, I need to get out of here, right? Where was Jean-Michel in calling his buddies, telling them to lay off, right? So as a result, the players don't come.
You told me why the OL fans should be mad at you?
That I bought a club from Jean-Michel Aulas, right? I should have left him alone. I should have let him go bankrupt. He had a year and a half to raise the money. Maybe he could have pulled it out. But if you take away the CVC money, you take away in 2024, there was more CVC money. You take away the one-time gains that we had when I sold the women's team in Seattle or elsewhere. Like, you can't get around the fact that this team, it's a bloated club. It was losing, you know, nearly 50 million euros a year in operating cash flow, and that's before the interest carry, not only on the stadium, but the arena Everybody says I sold that. He already sold it in the sale leaseback transaction. Look, I shouldn't have bought it from Jean-Michel. Firing him is, I'm sure, why we were sanctioned. I'm sure it's why we were relegated. And later on, we'll get to the cash that we showed on May 20th and June 24th. We should have never been relegated. You know, when I see things that are wrong, I can't control myself. I go down to Brazil, and fair and square, we win 14 games out of our first 17 in our second year, and suddenly we can't win a game, and Palmeiras is catching us, and they can't lose a game. And it was a company from Lyon, of all places, that had developed a methodology to spot match manipulation by player underperformance. Then I realized that we were losing the 2023 campaign to match manipulation. I got suspended for it. I was bringing shame to the league, couldn't keep my mouth shut. I called out corruption on national television. Everybody said he's crazy. Well, not so crazy now. They had a Senate investigation, open up, testimony publicly. They said TEXTOR proved manipulation definitively. A guy gets on national television, admits that he fixed games against Botafogo. He becomes a fugitive. He goes from Portugal to Barcelona. Finally, we trap him in Dubai. He's been arrested. Now he's extradited back to Brazil, and things are cleaning up, right? It's much, much harder now to fix games in Brazil, and Brazil has taken it on, and they're doing something about it. Did I want to do that? No. Did I like, honestly, having my physical safety threatened by some of the things I said publicly?
It was the case?
Of course. But so I come to France, and I see a group of 18 people led by a guy who's the CEO of Global Audit, who, if he applied the rules of audit to Olympic Lyon, we'd be fine. There would be a going concern qualification in our audit that says if you don't raise capital, or your shareholders don't support you, or if X, Y, and Z don't happen, you could have a risk of continuing as a going concern. They would seek a comfort letter. They would evaluate the veracity of that comfort letter, the ability of the shareholders to support the club. They would look at the history of us putting in 12 million euros a month, like from Botafogo or at the closing, and they would pass us. But that's not what happens. The CEO of Global Audit for Deloitte starts setting different rules. You got to show your P&L without player sales. Well, that's fine if you're a mid-table club. But what if you have the third most prolific academy in the world and you do 80 to 100 million a year in player sales? You have to count that as zero? What if you show up with a creative financing to address that need? It's 70 million of Hutton Capital. They put 10 million of the first installment in the bank, and they give us a contract to pay us another 70 for the right to future player transfer. They counted that as a zero. They looked at the 12 million a month that we bring in from Eagle Football. They counted that as a zero. So on May 20th, they give us a green light. They say, we're pleasantly surprised. Your numbers look good. Relegation is off the table. All that happened between May 20th and June 24th is our numbers got better. I was getting friendly text messages from Jean-Marc Michler during that period of time. He said, John, you have a problem with UEFA because they're trying to figure out this conflict between Lyon and Crystal Palace, and they want to know that the provisional relegation is off. My suggestion is you put in money early, so I wired 25 million in. I've got the text messages to prove it from Jean-Marc. Friendly conversation. So from May 20th to June 24th, our numbers get a bit better by 25 million. Then they get better because I sell Ryan Cherky. They said you can count zero player sales unless they're contracted. Well, Ryan Cherky was contracted. So now our numbers are 55 million better than they were on May 20th. So how do we have a green light on May 20th and we get relegated on June 24th without warning? This friendly text relationship I have with Jean-Marc Michler, where he's giving me advice on how to be okay with UEFA. If really he saw something that was wrong before we walked into that meeting, where was the friendly text? And if you don't like John TEXTOR, shouldn't you show more compassion for the community of Lyon? Because I wasn't the only one relegated. Right? So I think when I show up in a place like France, I have a natural disruptor mentality. In the technology business, I'm known as a disruptor. You know, I try to bring new solutions that disrupt legacy systems. I show up in Brazil, unfortunately, I saw corruption, I had to do something about it. I come to France, I see this incredible system, this star chamber of volunteers that will tell you how to run your business, and I shouldn't have come. I didn't expect this. And so an American disruptor who tries to change French institutions has probably never gone well in history, right? We can all agree with that.
You told me once you think French football is corrupted more than Brazil.
Corruption to me is, it's not just taking money. It's a corrupt state of mind. It is tilting the scales against a particular party. It's the loss of equilibrium of fairness. And yeah, I think that France is a place where people smile in your face while they're putting a dagger in your back. I think that New York, everybody's trying to take your money. Brazil, different people are trying to take your money, not good people, right? I actually like that level of corruption more than I like these incredibly polite conversations, these wonderful text messages. At any moment of this exchange with Jean-Marc Mickler, he could have said, John, we don't like this contract with Hutton Capital. You've got a problem. I didn't know I had a problem until we're in the meeting. And they say, well, there's a typo in this contract. We don't think it's a serious contract. The signature block for Ron Friedman says Ron Fried. Is there really a Ron Fried? It's like, well, he was on our board of directors at Lyon. So the fact that we got no warning, we got a green light on May 20th, we improved the numbers on the way to June 24th, and then they asked me in the meeting, well, John, can you prove that there's the $10 million first deposit for the Hutton transaction? I said, of course, but you could have told me yesterday. So I leave the meeting. We think, oh my God, we're going to get sanctions. We're going to get like a salary or a transfer ban. So I go out, I call the lawyers back in New York. They send me a letter. It says, yes, the $10 million is sitting in the bank for the Hutton transaction. The contract is good. You have $70 million coming. But before I could even get that letter to them, we were relegated. So and if you look at the cash we brought into that equation, we had just signed a contract to sell Crystal Palace to bring in $200 million. Ares gave us a letter that says, yeah, we'll leave $40 million of that aside as cushion for OL. Ares also gave me an additional term sheet because Michelle had given me a commitment letter for $30 million, but the interest rate was really high. Started at 20%, went to 25%, went to 30%. So Ares actually sent me a replacement note, said, no, don't take Michelle's money at 25%. We'll give you a fair term sheet. So I had a commitment letter from Hutton for 70. I had a commitment letter for Ares to leave 40 behind out of Crystal Palace. I had another 25 that Ares was willing to put in. We had another 30 from Michelle that she would have put in. And so I had more cash coming into this meeting than anybody from PSG to Marseille, Monaco. Yeah, they have more, right? If the DNCG cared about the community of Lyon instead of killing John Textor, they would have said, hey, call back Ares and ask them a question. Would they rather put in a little more money or get relegated? Well, if I called Ares and said, unbelievable, Mark, all this cash optionality that we have, the fact that we had already trimmed, by the time we got to the meeting, 40% from our wages. You know, this talk of the wage reduction over the summer, well, that occurred before the June 30th meeting. All those contracts rolling on. If I called Ares and said, oh my God, these people are going to relegate us, boom, they would have written a check that moment and they would have stopped it. But you get relegated before you even know what's going to happen. And so what's the difference between what we proposed that day and what Michelle proposed a couple weeks later? The difference is there's a new face on the club.
The numbers were the same?
Were the same numbers, differently organized. So if you look at what OL did to get back up, there's this talk of a $100 million, 87 million euro financing that came in. It was roughly 50 from Ares, 30 from Michelle, 20 or so from JP Conte from Iconic. So it's $100 million comes together. And in addition, Michelle signs a guarantee of 30. So it's $130 million in total. Well, There's 70 million from Hutton that they said is no good, even though the money's in the bank. There's a letter from Ares that says we'll leave 40 of the Crystal Palace money in. So that's 40 from Ares. There's a term sheet that Ares gave us of 25, right? So that's another 65. There's a commitment letter that Michelle had given us, signed it, docu-signed. I'll show it to you. There's 30, right? Well, it's the same 100. What's the difference? Well, fans will say, well, why wasn't it cash? I don't know. Because, the DNCG used to just accept a promise. Jean-Michel could come in and say, I'm going to sell Toko Ekambi for 20 million when everybody in the country knew he was going to go for 5, and that was good. Well, the next year, I show up and they say, no, it's got to be a contract. Okay. Well, these contracts are coming from people named Ares, Iconic, Michelle Kang. They're extremely credible, and they're in writing. Why is that not now trusted? That now has to be cash in a pile in the middle of the room? So I do think these rules have changed, and they changed on the fly, without notice. And if you look at the budget that Michelle just took in front of the DNCG this week, you'll find it's the same revenue plan that I gave them in May, June. It's the same 40% reduction that we had already pre-wired because of the contracts rolling off on expenses. I would say the only difference between the budget that she just took through the DNCG this week and the one that I showed on June 24th is probably the non-cash items, the amortization, because if you pick a different mix of players to sell, you get different numbers below the cash flow line. Same business model. There's talk about all these changes since Michelle came in. She's running a tighter business. It takes a long time to cut expenses in France. So we had the reduction in workforce, which took a long time because employees in France have, the right to consider resignation and all these things have to happen. The player contracts, you don't get to send players away. They have contracts. They get to decide. So we showed the DNCG in May and in June of 2024. What was my big mistake? I had a relegation squad in the middle of 2023. I had to ramp up expenses to get out of that problem. So I did increase player payroll because there's an overlap of the expense of the new players coming in on top of the expense of the players that haven't gone out. And it takes you till June 30th, 2025 for all those contracts to have run off. Lopez, Lovren, Lacazette, bonuses for Tolisso. But the important thing for supporters to understand is the income statement that I delivered in May and June showed that the trouble was over. That even with reduced revenues from TV, we had so reduced our expenses that we were sustainable as a business. The DNCG didn't need to worry about us at this point. What they did know is that we had built up a lot of back payables. Well, when they announced we're going to get relegated, it's kind of hard to raise capital. So that was a struggle. But that's where the new cash was. And so the cash that saved Michelle in the appeal was the same cash in a different form that was offered in May and June.
In Lyon, you've been criticized a lot for selling the arena and selling the women's team. Could you tell us why you did it? Because it was future revenues missing for the next year, you see what I mean?
Future revenues are great. But if they come with future losses, you've got to be careful. Or if they carry with them a lot of debt, you have to be even more careful. So start with the idea of the initial mistake. If our real numbers are that we're losing 45 million euros per year at the operating cash flow line, you add to that another 30 million in interest payments on the stadium. So now you're losing 75 million a year. We didn't bring enough capital to start to afford that because the capital we brought in went into the pockets of the shareholders, including Jean-Michel. So had we understood that some of our financial projections were highly inflated, had we understood, nobody did, that TV would blow up, had we understood that the DNCG had warned us in advance we were going to get sanctioned, we would have kept more of that cash. I paid 800 million for this club. I would have put more of it on the balance sheet. So let me apologize to the supporters for not forcing more of our 800 million onto the balance sheet for the health of the club. Because now I've got a problem, which is that you take away the CVC money, I'm losing 75 million in cash a year. So I look at the first decision on the women's team. It was losing 15.6 million euros a year. I know I'm going to be unpopular for saying this because we're very proud of the women's team. But at that particular time in women's football, we were the only people in the world paying that much in salaries. We were buying championships. We were the Manchester City of women's football. So I don't know what revenues were there. I didn't think the women's program was actually being treated well enough. They're playing in what looks like a schoolyard stadium. They have facilities and locker rooms that aren't sort of the level of other top women's teams in the world. Michelle Kang and I were talking about this. She thought that they were being underserved and disrespected in terms of what the women deserved. But as a business, we were losing 15.6 million euros a year, and that wasn't going to change. And Michelle took that on knowing she's going to take significant losses. She's got a much longer term vision of women's football. So that was a very smart transaction. You know, put it in the hands of somebody that really, really cares about it. I know Jean-Michel cares about women's football, but he didn't care enough to build the right locker rooms or the right offices or the right stadium. And he didn't deliver to me a sustainable program. It was losing 15 million euros a year and it wasn't stopping. So cutting a loss while you're also bringing in capital is a very good business decision. Now the arena, don't tell me I'm the one who sold it. He sold it. It's called a sale-leaseback transaction. We talked about this. He was the man who booked it that way as a sale-leaseback, but the contract said years later you have to pay him back. That was debt. And it wasn't shown on the balance sheet. It was 90 million euros of debt. And we didn't know it was going to make any money. I still don't know. I'll tell you, it's probably making money now because of what he did with Lady Gaga and Dua Lipa. But it's the first few events come, and Harry, one of the very smart guys within OL, comes to me and says, John, we're not pulling the numbers we projected. Against the revenues and the tickets, the place is full. But the cost of executing a show is very different than we expected. And I don't think we're getting the yield that we're supposed to get on this arena. So I'm looking at an arena which just opened up, where we have no experience running this kind of business. Just nobody at OL knew how to run this kind of business. And the first few shows were pulling really bad numbers in terms of the net. I've got a $90 million debt, that I've got to pay back on this thing. It's got a cost of capital. Would I rather sell it to Jean-Michel or somebody else, bring the cash in, because it helps me pay for the operating losses. It gets me out of the debt and gets me out of a business I don't understand. So I said at the time, I want to be in the football business, not the arena business. The great friend of Lyon, I'm sorry to be so sarcastic about this, but we make a deal to sell it to him. You take the small shows, we take the big stadium shows. Laurent Prudhomme signs a deal with him that I didn't know about, actually gives him control of booking the acts. Well, in the world of Jean-Michel, Lady Gaga is suddenly an arena show. Everywhere else in the world, she's a stadium show. Dua Lipa, apparently she can't fill a stadium either. She's now an arena show. They said, well, we talked to them. We didn't want it. Well, I have a fun story here. Dua Lipa is like my favorite female act. I wake up, it's a sickness. I wake up every morning like with some alarm clock Dua Lipa song waking me up out of bed. So I run into her the day after the show in the airport as we're leaving Lyon. And her manager says, no, we would have loved to have been in the stadium. That wasn't available to us, right? So look, I sold it because I didn't understand the business. I sold it because it was 90 million in debt. I sold it because the numbers looked very questionable in the first few shows. I took advice internally. I'm not just a cowboy. And I expected we would get the big shows. They would get the arena shows. And what happens the next summer? We get one show, Imagine Dragons, and Jean-Michel books Lady Gaga into the arena, Dua Lipa into the arena. And we have a huge revenue loss because we go from the Olympics and the Rugby World Cup and Taylor Swift to now Imagine Dragons, right? So I know Jean-Michel loves the club, but he took a lot of money out of the club. And when he bought the arena, he even took more revenues away from the club because those shows should have been in the stadium. To say that I sold the jewels of Lyon, I keep hearing that. I sold the women's team, which was losing money, and now it's better managed by Michel, and the whole community can be proud of it, and it's still here. It's just not costing us any money anymore. The arena, all of Lyon loves the arena. They get to go to the shows, and it's not costing us money anymore. And I don't have 90 million of debt to worry about in a business that we don't know how to manage. I do think Jean-Michel needs to do what he said. Send the big shows to us. Fill the stadium again. Because we all would love to see Lady Gaga with 70,000 people there, right? The women's team in Seattle, losing 9 million a year. Somebody offered us 58 million. Whatever, I understand my reputation in Lyon right now, but I want people to be enjoying Europa League. I think we nearly won Europa League last year. The Manchester United game was devastating for us.
What's your reputation now in Lyon, you think?
Reputation is who people think you are. Character is who you really are. So I don't give a damn. Right? I really don't. If you get into football worried about what people think of you...
That's your cowboy stuff. That's your...
No, I stole that quote from John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach of UCLA.
Okay.
And it's a quote I've had to rely on a lot of times when, you know, people come at you and I'm like, well, I've got sports journalists writing financial articles. Like, you know, I have Regis Dupont, who says I was kicked out of Lyon for financial irregularities. I'm like, Regis, what? Show me, right? But you can't dig into that stuff. What's my relationship with the people from Lyon? I would say I feel very appreciated. I run into people from Lyon all over Paris. I haven't hidden from France. I spend my summers in the south of France. I even go through Lyon. I'm in other towns in Lyon. And Lyon's like one of those national teams. You find fans of it everywhere. I get hugs. I have people that say, hey, I'm sorry about what happened, but I appreciate your work. Look, I love the Bad Gones. Mm-hmm. The leaders of the Bad Gones, I think they should get new leaders, right? The hashtag TEXTOR out stuff, I have an idea why that started. Because you know another great TEXTOR plan?
Tell me.
I just sent them their new pricing. Mm-hmm. It drives me crazy that the best price in the stadium is handed out, you know, for tickets by the Bad Gones. They have a better price that they get to offer for seats than any other group. When we go out and we do the pricing for families, we do the pricing for kids, we do the pricing for special interest groups, we do the pricing for corporate customers, the Bad Gones have an even lower price. They get to offer the best price anywhere in the community. Now, the group in the South, they have a higher price. I'm not sure why the ultras on the North get a better price than the ultras on the South. I'm not sure why the ultras at all get a better price than the 17-year-old kid who can't afford it. So I reset the pricing. I created discounts for the entire community because if you want to join the Bad Gones, it should be because you love the Bad Gones and you want to be one of them, right? They connect with you. It shouldn't be because they're the cheapest path into the stadium. It's why they have 6,000 people singing those songs on the one side and they only have 1,500 on the other. Pricing. Because the guys on the South, they sing pretty well too. So I see the leaders of the Bad Gones as being smart, educated, you know, fun, funny. They're leaders. They're leaders, but they're like anybody else. They're like a power group that controls all these 6,000 people. I think you should have one fan base for the club, not a bunch of little power groups that control the fan bases. So I think ultras across Europe hijack the relationship between club and community. And what you want to do as an owner of a club is be closer to your community, not have middlemen. And so that's not popular in Europe. I'm always going to be hated by the ultras. But I think ultimately the community, had we rolled out this ticket program, would have been very thankful because families could come back, kids could come back, and they could sit wherever they wanted, right? People of color, people of different subcultures. And when I see knife fights between the bad goons and, you know, a new fan group that shows up.
Racist problems as well.
You know, it's whether it's racism, culturalism, it's not the community. The community of Lyon is incredibly diverse. I wanted to see that diversity across our stadium, and they got their ticket pricing a couple of weeks on this plan right before the hashtag TEXTOR out signs came. So I wasn't surprised. I had the same hashtag TEXTOR out stuff happening in Belgium because, you know, we have bigger problems with them.
Did you see the banner against Metz? The OL fans had a banner, JT, John Textor, is a swindler of a system without safeguards, no to co-ownerships.
Well,
Did you see that?
I heard about it. I've got to be the dumbest swindler in the world. Like, swindlers end up with money. I just lose money, right? And I put 200 million in cash into Eagle. Eagle itself, on record, put 12 to 13 million euros a month in. By the time we got to the DNCG thing, we had put over 300 million euros into the club. That makes us the dumbest swindlers on the planet.
Tell me about your relationship with Michel Kang, because Michel Kang is the boss, the everyday boss of Olympique Lyonnais. You're in the group, so you're supposed to be upper in the system. How it works between the two of you?
Well, look, I can give it to you in stages, right? I met her in Florida. She's effectively a neighbor, two close communities. We became very good friends as sort of business friends. I feel she was very, very friendly to me on a number of occasions in deals we would do together. I know that the people at Lyon were very upset that I did extremely favorable deals for her out of this friendship. I got criticized greatly for the deals I would make with Michelle because I trusted her. You know, it's only been reported in one place before, but, you know, a lot of people don't know that I was in the intensive care unit in the hospital between the May 20th meeting and the June 24th meeting. I had emergency heart surgery. Michelle was one of the two people that I tried to reach out to by text to say, hey, I trust you with our business. I trust you with, you know, my family's investment. And I think it was a couple weeks later that the relegation happened. I remember really an emotional moment, crying with her, thanking her for stepping up. I had asked her to be co-chair prior to that. I think what happened next is something that only happens in football. She called me, she said, oh my God, John, they're painting your name on the walls in the streets. They're protesting you. They hate you here. And she made a decision, which I think is very clear in her press conference. Every time a question was asked about me, you know, she wouldn't say my name. She did what she thinks was right for the business, to distance the business from me. I think that was smart with the DNCG. It was smart in the appeal. Now, the guy that we all fired, Michelle wanted to fire him too. Well, he's back in the president's box. His friends are being nominated for the board of directors, and the guy that took so much cash out of the club and keeps taking cash from Dua Lipa and Lady Gaga is now right back where he's wanted to be. I think he worked very hard to get back there, and I think she's smart to see her protection in places that I wanted to reject.
You see Michelle's behavior as a betrayal?
It's business. We were never friends. We were business friends. We were friendly. We had common interests. And if it's...
And you're no longer in her interest.
Well...
You should be if you're in the group.
No, I think that she'd be smart to collaborate more with Eagle. There's a reason we went from relegation to Europa League in one window. We did it within the rules. I think that the DNCG has made it very hard for that collaboration to exist when they protest typical multi-club actions with Eagle, yet allow those same actions to happen with Chelsea. Look, she's she's better at the politics in France. She's shaken the hands and kissed the babies, as we say, and she's an impressive woman. And one of the shareholders says, well, John, you did great things getting us these trophies, but you're chaos, and she's the organization. And I think that's what the fans of Lyon should be upset with me, because my disruptive nature, my inability to kiss the ring, that's why we got relegated. I think they should be equally upset with the league, because the same people that broke the league are still running the league. I think they should be upset with the DNCG. I keep bringing up the sporting issues because they were attacking our squad that we had already paid for. And I just ask every fan of our club, you trusted me on Jake O'Brien. You trusted me on Ainsley Maitland-Niles. You trusted me on Lucas Perry, replacing the great Anthony Lopez. You trusted me on some decisions. I remember Sonny Anderson told me that Jake O'Brien was too slow. I'm like, what? Just because he's tall and white? He's like the fastest guy on the team. So at the same time, had that trust continued in Luis Enrique, Jair Cunha, Igor Jesus, Thiago Amada, Savarino, if these players were allowed to come in that we had already paid for in January, and the DNCG said, hey, John, you spent too much. Stop buying. But you can play the people that you already own. Instead, they're listening to all the other presidents that were organized. We'd be in Champions League. So I'm okay that the fans are mad at me for the cowboy hat, because the whole country thought it was funny, except the people running French football, right? They wanted the cowboy gone. First time I've ever worn a cowboy hat. Huge mistake.
You've been criticized a lot about your relationship with Nottingham Forest and with the president Marinakis, a lot of deals with Forest, and a lot of people thought some transfers have been over-evaluated. You talked about Moussa Niakate, about 30 million euros, maybe Junior Mangala as well, about 30 million as well. Could you tell us about?
Yeah, I think Mangala was a bit lower, but yeah, let me talk about those on a case-by-case basis. First of all, the relationship with Marinakis is very much forged out of Brazil, because he's the most active European owner in Brazil. Okay. If you look at his roster at Olympiacos, you look at his roster at Rio Ave, at Nottingham Forest, and we're like the national team of Brazil, along with Santos and some of the more recent leaders, Flamengo and Palmeiras. So anytime you have a very aggressive buyer of talent who spends a lot of money investing in clubs he loves, and he loves Brazilians, Botafogo is going to have a relationship with him. So
because he wanted to sell him players.
Yeah, and that relationship also means that he may buy a player from you in one market, he may sell you a player in another market. At the time the situation was happening with Niakate, you have to remember what our center backs looked like at that time. We had a Diamande who looked great on certain occasions and wasn't at the level on other occasions. We had Lovren, great veteran, much slower, really struggling. We were really struggling in the back. And I was desperate, and I wanted a left-footed center back with Premier League experience, because I had a vision for this club to be at the top of Europe, not to be, mid-table France. And when you looked at left-footed center backs at that time, we had Mark Gay at Crystal Palace. Well, Newcastle was offering 65 million for him. You had Aguirre at West Ham. I liked him, the Moroccan. They were asking
in Marseille now.
Yeah, they were asking 40 for him at the time. Honestly, I thought we should have paid somewhere around, the football department said a low of 18, a high of like 22, 23. I paid 30. He was the only left-footed center back in the market with Premier League experience who had been a starter in the Premier League. You can say he was third choice there, but he had a whole bunch of starts in the Premier League, did pretty damn well. And yeah, okay, we overpaid on market value, but I'd ask every one of these really smart sports journalists, go back to that market in time, find me the prices of every left-footed center back with starting experience in the Premier League. And we'll get to Mangala in a minute.
Yeah.
But
just to finish about Niakate, people in Lyon were a bit sad as well because they had Mamadou Sarr, great prospect, great talent in the squad. And I think to make the deal, Moussa Niakate, or to make a bit money in the wallet, you had to sell Mamadou Sarr 10 millions, about 10 millions, I guess, to Strasbourg. And he's a great player, great prospect.
Well, you're like, that's a bit like when I tell people that I have an undefeated record skateboarding against Tony Hawk. He's never beaten me, right? It's true.
Because you never played against him.
No. The time I competed against him, I think he was 9 and I was 12, right? So...
This is true? It's a true story?
Yeah, I competed against Tony Hawk, and it was a contest that nobody remembers, and he was like, he could barely walk, probably.
We've got the quote.
So when you talk about Mamadou Sarr, you know, he was not ready to step into the starting lineup at that particular time. The football department made that clear. He was the 3rd or 4th or often the 5th choice. We had other center backs ahead of him. He was an incredible prospect. We made a football decision to send him to Belgium. I had such a great belief in him. Yeah. And I sort of forced the coach there to play him at the 6 because his feet were incredible. Mm-hmm. I wanted to show that versatility, and we played him at the 6 there. And he showed amazing ball skills, not, you know, as a 2, but as a 6. And he had some injuries, which unfortunately really hurt us because he had a stomach muscle strain that was quite serious. And we lost him at a critical point as we were fighting relegation. We had been promoted, and then we were just about to go right back down. And that whole development of Mamadou Sarr and getting him the minutes that he needed was what he needed to develop. It had nothing to do with Niakate. He couldn't have come in at that point. Ultimately, he shows well there. He sells for 10 million. And at the time he sold, I mean, I was asking the coaching staff at the time, is he ready to come in right now? And the answer was still no. So yeah, you sell this incredible prospect. And if you're at Lyon, you fall in love with these guys, like Mohamed El Arouche.
Because it's from the academy as well. Yeah, you tried.
Yeah, one of my favorite players. You know, had a lot of struggles in the Lyon community, getting focused, keeping things straight. We tried him in different environments. I still love the kid, right? But some of these incredible, incredible future stars work out. Some of them don't, right? I heard Enzo...
Just left Molenbeek.
Yeah. I heard Enzo Molabe was the next Mbappe. Well, he might become that, but he hasn't shown that yet, right? So we're so invested in our academy because that's the DNA of Lyon, that we see these stars and we don't want them to go anywhere. But I have a budget, and the budget's got to be about the players that are ready or about to be ready, and I'm losing so much money. I have to sell players to make it work, and sometimes you make decisions you look really stupid, and sometimes you make decisions you look really smart. Malik Fofana, if I didn't have a team in Belgium, I wouldn't have known the player, I wouldn't have seen the player.
Great player.
Right.
No, you did some good things. Huh?
Let's talk about Mangala.
Yeah, and then I will tell you the few another few good
let's
things.
finish with all the bad stuff I did. But it's Mangala. I liked him. I liked him in the Premier League. I saw him at Nottingham Forest. He was a starting player there. He was a starting player on the Belgian national team when they were #1 in the world. And he's a very simple, elegant, not too flashy, capable guy that gets the ball in his feet. He plays open to the ball. He plays open to the distribution, and he moves it, right? And I needed something like that in the midfield. Now you have Ryan Cherky, who's deciding where he wants to go on the field at any given time. You've got players all over the place with incredible talent, and I needed somebody in the middle, like a laxative that calms down your stomach, right? And so I loved him coming to the club. And yeah, we paid a good number, but he's a Premier League player, and that level is higher than Ligue 1. Sorry, but it is. And he gets here, he gets the minutes. Pierre Sage, for a variety of reasons, doesn't fancy him. Pierre and I are very good friends, and I love him. And I just don't understand what he didn't like about him. And he kept going to sort of a Lyon core. Pierre was a very fluid and creative coach.
Pierre Sage.
Right? And I think that style is very different than what I just described in terms of what I was hoping to see with Mangala and what Pierre needed. So now you're devaluing this player. He's just going down in value because he's sitting on the bench. We loan him to Everton. It's well known that I signed a contract to buy Everton. I thought we were going to go there. He develops into 90 minutes a game. You look at his, before the injury, 90 minutes a game for Everton. One of the strongest midfielders, most reliable in the Premier League. So nobody can tell me that spending 25 million euros for a 90-minute start in the Premier League is overpaying. That's insane. And now he's back. And I saw a projection recently that we're going to bring him back and we might sell him for, maybe he's worth 15. If he gets back and he's healthy, he's still worth mid-20s because he's still a starting Premier League player. I hope he stays at OL because I think we need that kind of leadership.
To continue and maybe finish about your critics, because I think people don't understand the way you want to deal with the group and to deal with the clubs. And people are maybe scared. Some people are accusing you to do like a Ponzi pyramid. You see what I mean? To use...
That's disgusting. People take somebody...
Just let me explain what it means.
I know, but think about that. I know what it means. It's like a guy doing financial transactions that you don't understand. Let's just call him a Ponzi guy. That's disgusting.
But just to make people understand, because it's a bit complicated, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it's to use money of a club to another club and continue with the third club and continue, etc. More or less.
I don't know. I still don't know what that means. A Ponzi scheme, I'm fairly certain it's like a pyramid scheme. I don't know.
Which is illegal in France.
One, raising money from outsiders and using that money to pay other investors. I'm the largest cash investor in Eagle football. I read articles from Vincent DeLuc that because I was on EasyJet, I didn't have money, I think the DNCG once told me they thought I only invested 5 million in the whole system. Well, we're audited. 200 million in cash. I'm the largest cash investor in Eagle football. More than Michel, more than JP Conte. Aries put in more money than I did, but they're a big, big fund, right? So I think the idea of central cash is interesting. Money comes into the system and it's in one pot of money and you send it where you need the help, right? It is interesting if you have installments from one club, what does that club do with them? Well, that club operates independent of OL. Why? Because we're only a 90% shareholder in Botafogo. It has a 10% shareholder, which is a social club. So it runs like a normal club does. When it sells a player, it might factor the receivables. Everybody does it. Lyon was doing it long before I got here. Lyon is owned 93% by Eagle Football, something by Jean-Michel. There are another 6,000 shareholders in the public. It operates like an independent football club. It buys and it sells and it factors receivables, right? So if a pile of cash is developing at the same time in one of the clubs and we have a cash pooling concept to help all the clubs, that's a great thing, right? And that allows us to help Lyon when it's losing money. It allowed us at various times to buy some players for Botafogo. And in the end, it's all one checkbook and one group of investors. So where does the concept of a Ponzi scheme come into play? For people to come along and say, well, yeah, that guy's really smart on moving money around, so he must be a Ponzi scheme guy, I mean, I'm the largest investor. Michel's the next largest investor. People like us don't get involved in Ponzi schemes.
At your credit, because you did a few good stuff in Lyon, you chose personally Pierre Sage, who succeeded in Lyon, from the bottom to the Europe.
No, he's really doing well.
Now he's doing great.
I'm looking pretty stupid now.
No,
Paulo Fonseca is fabulous, but
Paulo Fonseca is doing
so
well.
Happy
Players
for Pierre.
like him.
I'm so happy for Pierre.
And Pierre is doing great. You chose personally these two guys. Are you proud about it? It's not about pride. Are you happy to see Pierre succeeding in Lens?
Yeah, so am I proud about the decision? Pride's not the word. I mean, I will tell you. Yeah, no, it was a smart decision. I had the most ridiculous criticism inside the football staff. You know, there's a guy who runs everything for Michel now who's like, basically told me, no. Next up in line is this guy. I mean, what do you mean next up in line? I mean, this is the thing about France. No, it's the whole world. It's not France. You know, there was another guy that had been in the wings working on his pro license, and he'd been interim or assistant or whatever. And so he was the next one to get the job. What does that have to do with making the right decision? I got to know Pierre at the academy. We talked football. I thought he was the smartest guy in football, in the Lyon architecture, that we could get at a very difficult time. Laurent Blanc, a lovely guy, but, you know, he wasn't up for it. He was very, very lethargic and low energy and not fighting hard in the preseason. He took the team down to Molenbeek. Molenbeek beat him. Like, we had a problem, and I should have made that decision to bring in a new coach earlier in the summer. And by starting the year with him, we ended up where we ended up. And to have Pierre Sage, a guy of that mind and that ambition, of this, the way he looked at the game and the conversations we had, I was going to hire him. I didn't care if he had ever been a coach. I just talked to him and said, are you really ready for this moment? Because that's the difference between a really good coach in the academy and somebody that can win games in Europe. So, no, I didn't think it was a tough decision. I thought it looked like a tough decision. I think people thought it was crazy.
But it worked.
Yeah, so why do you fire him then? You know,
Because you had another goal for years.
Well, we also had some results that were turning against us. We had incredible creativity offensively. We had, I think that Pierre has had a rapid evolution as a coach. He's now coaching defense with structure like he didn't when he was with us. Like, I felt as if we had some liabilities on defense that would not allow us to get where we needed to be. And we made a decision, and now we're in a situation where you can look at that and say, well, Pierre Sage is a spectacular coach, and Paulo Fonseca is a spectacular coach. And I couldn't be happier for Pierre. You know, he and I still text each other. His assistants, you know, sent me a really nice note recently because they've seen the trouble I'm going through in the world of Lyon. I love the relationship. I'm very, very excited about what he's done.
The video with the club presidents, when you say Nasser Al-Khelaifi bullies everybody, has been viral. How do you evaluate the financial situation of the French football? It means, and to make me laugh, as the Botafogo boss, how happy were you to win against PSG at the World Cup?
Well, first of all, let me be clear about that.
Yeah.
There was no satisfaction in beating Nasser's PSG.
True?
Yes, true.
Okay. Because you looked happier.
Yeah, no. There was incredible satisfaction of beating PSG. There's a difference.
Okay.
Right? I got no thrill out of it because it was him. I got a thrill out of it because it was the best team in the world, clearly, at that time. They had just been destroying people in Champions League just before that. I knew this event was important to them. I thought they might overlook us. But it was an incredible achievement for a group of guys in Brazil, people that we found in the second division of Paraguay or Japan or the Emirates, you know. And it shows the power of football, the beauty of football, that there are players everywhere in this world. And I always say, God did not just kiss the feet of European children. I know Nasser already knows that because he's got some great Brazilians on his team. But one of the reasons it didn't sort of give me great pleasure because it was Nasser's team is by then he and I had really come together and spent some nice time together. A lot of people don't know that, but he does have a sense of humor. The cowboy thing, I think was funny to both of us because him saying that on that call, like you can get in a fight with one of your best friends and somebody records it and puts it out on social media and makes you look like arch enemies. Yeah, I have a difficulty with the imbalance of money.
So the debate was quite strong. You said bully, that's how you bully everybody.
Yeah, but if
he treated you a cowboy.
The guy who was the jerk on that call was JP.
Okay.
Yeah, that you have to talk French. We're a French league, right? Well, this is our problem. We're so much a French league that we have no international revenues, right? So the dinosaurs of this league, like JP Caillot, I mean, honestly, like if you're not going to bring modern ideas to the table, you can be a dinosaur. You can be the great president of your club, but don't run the league and tell people that bring new ideas to shut up because they don't speak French. I didn't really, I had a problem with Nasser on that call, but he had a problem with me on that call. It's an argument. Nobody knew somebody was taping it. Who was the jerk who was taping it, right? Why is nobody talking about that guy? So Nasser has been incredibly helpful to me since then. We had problems at UEFA. He was helpful. Okay. I've had personal challenges dealing with different people within the industry. He's been incredibly helpful.
And he helped you to make your best joke?
Which
with
is
the cowboy hat.
Well, that first of all,
that was funny.
I don't want to bring up her name, but there's a young woman that worked at Lyon who had the idea, and I'm like, come on, seriously? She works, as one of the strong assistants, and then she went out and she found this hat for me, and it's not even a cowboy hat. It's like a caricature of a cowboy hat. It's the most Western of all cowboy hats, and I've never really worn a cowboy hat in public, even though my name is Tex, So look, Nasser has a great sense of humor. He's been incredibly helpful. He's sent me very nice messages, even since the difficulty of me leaving. He knows how it hurt me.
He laughed about the hat? At the time, I'm not sure.
I think he laughed about it even then. Yeah. I mean, it's, he doesn't drink, so he doesn't show his humor as effusively as the rest of us, when we have a couple of beers, but he's a perfectly funny guy.
Lyon is dreaming about the Benzema return.
Oh.
Is it something possible? Is it something you wish? Is it something financially possible?
Well, Michelle better write a really big check for that one.
It's true. But
look, I don't know. It's. I have a really good relationship with the football department, but I really do, let them make these decisions because they work for Michelle now. I'm a big fan of these situations that come up, and when I read about Endrick or I hear that we're looking at them, and I'll sort of send in my 2 cents. I don't know if they read my emails anymore. I do. I still do talk to the football department. I enjoy them. Benzema, I think he has to return to us, doesn't he? Of course he does. Of course he does. And, I just hope he comes at a time when he still has, the legs that we remember. And I think he has the ability right now to come in and impact this team at an incredible level. Not just because he's smart, but he does still have the wheels. He hasn't lost his legs. He could destroy people for us. I don't know if it's possible. I think dreaming's good. But, I used to have an expression, dream with your eyes wide open. And not only will you see the world, but it will come to you. And I think we should dream about Benzema. I think that's a good dream.
You already had discussions with Benzema for a return, for a comeback?
Not directly, but with his club.
Okay, with Al Ittihad?
Yeah, but that was last year.
Okay.
I had a relationship that started with the CEO. I think his name is Olivieri. He was the head of Benfica, which I was very close to acquiring an interest in at one time. And, to think that Benzema would be somebody's problem, which to us would be our salvation. I reached out. I talked to the club. I tried to see if something was there. And, It's just very difficult at the time. Their investment in him was remarkable, but I never talked to the player and never really got to the point of understanding where he was in his personal decision. I thought if we could make a deal with a Saudi club, and we tried hard. I threw a lot of money at them in various forms, not only cash, but securities, ownership, these types of things to try and build
ownership. It would have been shareholder of Lyon? It would have been a possibility?
Well, the offer was equity in Eagle, Lyon, for the club and for the athlete, because it was the only way you could get up to a level given what they paid for him. So they would have needed a significant return on their investment because I don't know what they paid, 200 or whatever when he arrived. But yeah, we were creative, we were strong, we went at it seriously, and I think they listened to it, but it never really got to the athlete to that point. You'll have to ask him what he heard about it.
So storytelling would be great, would be unbelievable.
It sure would. You know what would be better storytelling?
Tell me.
If the DNCG would let us bring the players that we already own. That would be good. Fill up this roster, every gap we have with, half the team that beat PSG in the Club World Cup would kill to be in Lyon. Wouldn't it be great if they were allowed to come, right? So, but we love our team in Botafogo, and, those same people love fighting for championships down there. But I really, really hope the collaboration can return, in a healthy way across Eagle. And I hope that, if they let Chelsea and Strasbourg do it, I hope they let OL do it. But in the meantime, it's not even a topic. Michelle is running it as a standalone club. I think she's forced to do that in some respects. And hopefully the collaboration returns.
Thank you very much.
Great.
C'est carré?
C'est carré. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for your time.